Good morning. As students of Theosophy, we gather every Sunday at the United Lodge of Theosophists locations around the world to discuss and promulgate the original and unadulterated teachings of Theosophy, as given out by Madame Helena Petrovna Blavatsky and Mr. William Kwan Judge. The United Lodge of Theosophists, or ULT, is an association of students of Theosophy which came into being through the determination of a small number of Theosophists to pursue the objectives of the Theosophical movement without organizational distractions or formalities. The first parent lodge of ULT was started in Los Angeles, California by Mr. Robert Crosby and 7 other associates through the adoption of its declaration on February 18, 1909. Our lodge in DC and many others around the world were founded thanks to the revival efforts of Mr. Bahman Pestonji Wadia. Today's presentation will be on the world of dreams, and next week the topic will be the real Christmas. Our DC Lodge also meets every first and third Sunday of the month at 12:30 p.m. to read and discuss selected theosophical writings. We're currently having roundtable discussions on the Bhagavad Gita. The Declaration of the United Lodge of Theosophists states the following. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy, and the exemplification and practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization. And it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes, and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading comes from the voice of the silence. Give up thy life, if thou wouldst live. 3 halls, O weary pilgrim, lead to the end of toils. 3 halls, O conqueror of Mara, will bring thee through the 3 states into the 4th, and thence into the 7 worlds, the worlds of rest eternal. If thou wouldst learn their names, then hearken and remember. The name of the first hole is ignorance, avidya. It is the hole in which thou sawest the light, in which thou livest and shall die. The name of hole the second is the hole of learning. In it thy soul will find the blossoms of life, but under every flower a serpent coiled. The name of the third hole is wisdom, beyond which stretch the shoreless waters of Akshara, the indestructible fount of omniscience. If thou wouldst cross the first hole safely, let not thy mind mistake the fires of lust that burn therein for the sunlight of life. If thou wouldst cross the second safely, stop not the fragrance of its stupefying blossoms to inhale. If freed thou wouldst be from the karmic chains, seek not for thy guru in those Mayavic regions. The wise ones tarry not in pleasure grounds of senses. The wise ones heed not the sweet-tongued voices of illusion. Seek for him who is to give thee birth in the hole of wisdom, the hole which lies beyond, wherein all shadows are unknown, and where the light of truth shines with unfading glory. That which is uncreate abides in thee, disciple, as it abides in that hole. If thou wouldst reach it and blend the two, thou must divest thyself of thy dark garments of illusion. Stifle the voice of flesh. Allow no image of the senses to get between its light and shine, and thine, that thus the twain may blend in one. And now for today's talk.
Thank you. Friends, today's compilation on dreams is primarily from the Theosophical movement and Theosophist publications, which reference the secret doctrine, the voice of the silence, which you just heard from, and the Bhagavad Gita primarily. We experience dreams when we fall asleep every night. It is so common an occurrence that we scarcely pay any attention to our sleep experience. But dreams have very important lessons to teach us. There are numerous references to dreams in the Old Testament, including the one in Job, noting that in dreams and visions of the night, man is instructed. Modern science has paid only superficial attention to this important phenomenon. It is considered to be of little consequence because mind is taken to be the secondary effect of electrobiomolecular activity of the brain and doomed to disappear like a puff of steam after the death of the body. Experimental psychology has largely ignored dreams and everything else beyond the waking consciousness. Many psychiatrists and other empiricists assume that the mind is asleep while dreaming goes on, and that the dreamer is unconscious during sleep. But the basic premise of the ancient science is that mind is independent of the body and not a product of physical evolution. It is a ray of the universal mind evolving through countless reincarnations under karmic law. Outline the sevenfold nature of man, which we talk about in separate lectures, but we need to know these things a little bit in order to understand what we're talking about relative to dreams. So the higher godly manas, the higher manas, is only partially incarnate as the lower mind being, that's the lower manas, the mortal man. Hence our dual mind, the higher immortal and lower mortal. We have only one mind, but it operates in two different ways. It is this basic truth that underlines the three planes of human life: waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. The ancients well understood that these planes contain the key to the deepest mystery of the complex nature of man. The Upanishads include important expositions on the three planes of human life and draw lessons from them, leading to the most sublime truths of the psychological mysteries of man. Even ordinary, chaotic, meaningless dreams teach us many lessons if we only pay careful attention to them. The first lesson even ordinary dreams teach us is the fact that the sensorium, that's the sensory faculties considered as a whole, is independent of and not in the physical body. We see, hear, smell, taste, and touch in the dream state as vividly as when we are awake, when the body is fast asleep, and when senses and most of the brain are in abeyance. Lingua Serura, or the astral body, is a real seat of the sensorium. That's where it is. It's not over there. It's here. The second lesson dreams teach is the fact that the inner self is independent of the body. As we experience all the emotions and mental states when the body is fast asleep, oblivious to the external world. When from the dream state he passes into the deep sleep or Sushupti state, the personal man is wholly unconscious of his existence. When he returns to the waking state through the dream state, he does not lose his self-identity in spite of all these transformations. He feels sure that he was the same self in the waking life during dream experiences and also during the state of deep sleep, the state of apparent oblivion. The deep sleep state refreshes him with new energy, deep peace, inner joy, and contentment when he awakes in the morning. This would not be the case where the deep sleep state and oblivion of itself, of self. The unchanging self-identity runs like an unbroken thread through all the myriad experiences of the three states and remains the same self. This supports the proposition of ancient psychology that self or ego is distinct from and unaffected by myriads of sensations and experiences it undergoes as it cycles through the three planes of being. Nothing adheres to this self. The perceiver of them all stands on high, unaffected, and remains unchanged. Theosophy teaches that when the deep sleep state is reached after the dream state, the ego regains temporarily its original freedom, a high spiritual state full of knowledge and bliss, because the ego Manas is a son of the universal mind, or Mahat. In the voice of the silence we just heard, the deep sleep state is called the Hall of Wisdom, it's mentioned there, where the ego feeds on ambrosia and revels in its celestial freedom. After enjoying the freedom of this hall, and when the time comes for waking, the ego returns from its celestial home to its bodily prison by the gate of the dream state. As it is beginning to assume the bodily apparatus, the lower brain mind begins to awaken in the dream state and sees for a time the activity of its divine parrot, the ego, as the ego tries to impress the lower mind with its knowledge and wisdom of past, present, and future. But the spiritual impressions so received are lost as they get mixed up with the chaotic impressions of the waking experiences of the lower mind, which troop into the dream state, and we wake up none the wiser, because we have made our mind and brain coarse and unfit for the reception of superfine spiritual impressions of the divine ego. The waking life of the majority of people is full of mere personal, selfish pursuits and lower desires, so their dream life is polluted with impure, lower impressions. to receive benefits from our divine parent ego in the dream state and to bring them back to the waking state, the waking state must be kept clean and pure by performing duties dispassionately as sacrifices to the God within with calmness ever present, thus elevating and ennobling our lives. The brain mind, so purified and becalmed, enters the dream state fit to receive and retain the impressions of the higher ego, which can be brought back more or less intact to the waking life for the benefit of our fellow man and ourselves. There are many instances of high-minded people receiving knowledge and illumination through dreams. One example is Thomas Paine, who called the voluntary visitors, which is in effect a dream. When the lower man is sufficiently purified and attuned to the ego within, he will receive illumination and visions of truth in dreams. Very pure and holy men have been inspired like that even during the waking state. H.P. Blavatsky has given us a wealth of information on dreams in places like questions and answers in Transactions of the Blavatsky Lodge, pages 59 to 79. HPB gives hints as to what we can do while awake to help us to take advantage of the sleep condition, and on page 79 she roughly divides dreams into 7 classes. There is no simple answer to the question of what it is that dreams, says HPB. It depends entirely on each individual what principle will be the chief motor in dreams and whether they will be remembered or forgotten. The principles active during ordinary dreams, called idle visions, as distinguished from real dreams, are karma, the seat of the personal ego, and of desire, awakened into chaotic activity by the slumbering reminiscences of the lower manas. It is the brain and the karma monastic principle which helps us to remember our dreams or prevents us from gaining any clear idea of what happens to us during sleep of the body. The cerebellum functions during sleep. It is the organ of instinctual animal functions which reflects themselves in or produce dreams which for the most part are chaotic and inconsequent. Dreams which are remembered and present a sequence of events are the results of the vision of the higher ego. The combined action of karma and lower manas is mechanical, with instinct, not reason, active in them. During sleep, they receive and mechanically send out electric shocks to and from various nerve centers. These fade out on waking, or if impressed strongly enough, are registered and preserved by the retentive faculty of the brain. But generally, our memory registers only some of the distorted impressions which the brain receives at the moment of awakening. The dream state passing into the waking state can be compared to the embers of a dying fire, radiating and throwing off sparks. The play of the memory is like a current of air rekindling the dying embers, as the cerebrum, which functions when we are awake, begins to take over All these conditions can be affected by us for good or ill, the waking consciousness, in the waking consciousness. Our dream condition can be changed by right living during the waking state and by right preparation before sleep, so that our last thoughts before we sink into slumber are of high ideals and noble aspirations. Before going to sleep, a period spent in quieting our lower mind, filled with personal ideas and desires, will help. Just as our last thoughts in any incarnation determine our consciousness after death, so our last thoughts before going to sleep determine the dream state, and the dream state in turn affects our waking consciousness the following day. Ordinary fancy should be curbed, while imagination has to be cultivated. Imagination is not fancy, it is image building. The higher the type of image building we have cultivated, the more spiritual will be the remembrance of the images we see in dreams. So we understand why we are advised not only to clear the mind and the emotions and the brain just before sleeping, but to give them definite food of a high nature, like reading devotional books, keeping high ideals in mind, and giving the imagination a spiritual bent, remembering that each night we contact our spiritual ego and enter into the Sushupti condition of consciousness. We are advised not to send children off to bed in a state of physical and mental exhaustion. There are lots of elevating bedtime stories so that their brain and emotional condition are more in tune with the real life. There are many wonderful tranquilizing mantras in the voice of the silence, which can be the last remembered thing before going to sleep, by cleansing the body of the dirt of the day, harmonizing the emotions, and giving the mind seed ideas of a spiritual nature. We can try these things on ourselves, and finding them good and useful, give the child the benefit of what we have learned. When interpreted correctly, dreams can give us major insights into our life and situations. Most dreams are forgotten, but some dreams leave a vivid impact on our minds, lingering even after waking up. There are recurring dreams and nightmares which compel people to look for the meaning and message. Most ancient cultures had their own theories of nature, function, and meaning of dreams. The emergence of psychoanalysis prompted the beginning of recognition that a large part of our mind is mostly unconscious, and that it contains all the wishes, desires, fears, hopes, traits, and personalities that we push out of all awareness, either because they are too threatening to confront or because they are socially unacceptable. These influence our waking consciousness and often lead to conflicts. In psychoanalysis, a dream is broken down into various small parts, and the patient is asked to consider each part and say what associations arise in his mind. After the process of free association to the dream is over, the therapist integrates all the inputs and looks to common underlying theme in relation to the personality, symptoms, and life history of the dreamer. If we can develop the skill of interpreting dreams, they are a huge asset in understanding our own selves as well as others. They carry the potential of offering a new perspective and transforming us, writes clinical psychologist and spiritual therapist Pulkit Sharma in the October 2016 publication of Life Positive. In his book, Man and His Symbols, Carl Jung remarks that it is plain foolishness to believe in ready-made systematic guides to dream interpretation. No dream symbol can be separated from the individual who dreams it. And there is no definite and straightforward interpretation of any dream. Each individual varies so much in the way that his unconscious complements or compensates his conscious mind that it is impossible to be sure how far dreams and their symbols can be classified at all. Dreams are a bridge between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. Sigmund Freud, founder of psychoanalysis, referred to dreams as the royal road to the unconscious, as dreams allow us to work with and understand unconscious. Ordinary dreams or idle visions, or the physiological dreams, may be caused by some idea or event strongly impressed upon the brain during waking hours. They are dreams that reflect thoughts and desires of waking state, and hence can be termed as idle dreams. Having its basis in the psychological nature. In dealing with such dreams, Freud speaks of repressed desires finding expression in dreams. We might say that real dreams are a reflection of what is witnessed by the ego in its own plane. HPB writes, the nature and function of real dreams cannot be understood unless we admit the existence of an immortal ego, immortal man, independent of the physical body. Shorn of the ability to dream, could there be any progress for the human race? It has been asserted that our greatest scriptures have all been the result of dreams and the dreamer. Not a classic of all literature, not an inspiration, not an invention, but has the product of dreams and dreamers. The Bhagavad Gita answers the question of actual nature of dreams, as does every other ancient scripture, and does H.P. Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine. So, we are going to make one more point or two more points and then end this. Both the least of men and the greatest Mahatma are souls. The difference is always in degree and not in kind. We live while in the body in the four lower planes of being. The incarnate Mahatma works in, on, and through these four worlds open to us, but the Mahatma lives, moves, and has his being in the three higher worlds, worlds known to us only by hearsay and through the broken memories of what we call our dreams. Our four lower principles largely control us, but an adept is one who has obtained mastery over his four lower principles. Hence no advanced adept ever dreams, as he has gained full control of all the principles and elements of being. And that is our objective in Theosophy someday, to get to that point through our own self-induced and self-devised efforts. Self-knowledge, this means the philosophy of life. Self-discipline, this means the ethics of action. Self-control, this means that equilibrium in the individual whose universal presence we call law. In bottom line of the keynote is impersonality. Law in nature becomes will in the individual. Relative to the seven great planes of being, HPB writes, whatever plane our consciousness may be acting in, both we and the things belonging to that plane are for the time being our only realities. So we're going to stop it here and open the floor for comments and questions. Yes?
So the astral body is the body that's used during dreams. It's like the one that like takes you to the places that you see.
Well, the astral body is a skeleton, if you will, of the physical body. In other words,
It's the link.
it's a link. Yeah, it's a link. You're right. But the dream state, the deep sleep state, this physical body is laying still, not aware of what's going on, unless you're as an adept, they never dream. So adepts are in this constant state. If we're talking about that deep sleep state, that's this student's understanding.
Question.
Sure.
So then, once we reach to the higher mind, that is what takes us further into our egoic life in the dream state?
Correct. But it gets all muddled up. When we're in our deep sleep state, we're there. We're in the higher mind state. But then we go into the sleep state in our reawakening, and that's when things get confused. When we, there's things that's called visions. We mentioned Pompane. He had what he called voluntary visitors, which prompted him to do the things he did to help us gain our independence from Great Britain by writing uplifting things to the troops, etc. So that's where you operate directly in a deep sleep state.
What happens to us in the Turiya state, which is above those three that you listed there?
What are you talking about? This one right here?
Turiya.
Turiya.
HPB lists Turiya as the highest spiritual consciousness, that when we go above the dreamless sleep, that's where we are, and it's the highest state we can reach. It's the fourth. So where are we then?
We're here. That's this student's understanding, which is really a permanent part of us, except it depends on, well, if we train ourselves like an adept does, we will be able to reach up. We have to do it through our own efforts to this universal state. Go ahead.
The student's understanding is that all those states that we go through are automatic every night. That whether you're aware of it or not, you go through it anyway.
Absolutely.
Because the higher ego has to have that time to contact the universal mind and further communicate with those stars, HPV says, from which we come. So that astral body is star dust, according to her explanations, which the student in the back asked about.
So the astral body is
the
asleep.
connecting link.
You're saying that the astral body is asleep with the physical body, dormant?
Yeah, because you go from one to the next until you reach the highest consciousness. And she says that sometimes that Turiya state is not reached. It depends on the quality of the person's sheaths, and you, I think, call them cleansing process.
Well,
the purity process.
The purification process.
So according to how pure we are, we might not reach the Turiya state, but the other three, every human soul goes through. And she says that without that, we would not really be able to continue with life, because that state is what comforts us. She says that there's no judgment, total acceptance, and universal love in that state that we reach, and it is given to everybody.
Yeah, this is available to everyone and given to everyone in that deep sleep state.
Yep.
So those are dormant while we're asleep too.
The higher triad is not dormant because the three go together, but the lower
The higher triad never sleeps, no.
Yeah.
And it said that the depths never sleep.
Well, that's because they're awake
are
at all times.
completely conscious all the time. So that is the song, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, merrily, 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 life is but a dream. That's where we are now. We're in the lowest of this coming down. This is the earth right here where we live in. We live in the physical world, and it's very difficult for us to see beyond that. And that's what this philosophy tries to help us do, is to see beyond where we are now.
HPB tells us that that's a fallacious way of thinking. We have nothing to do with that physical body. It's just a temple.
Exactly.
Without it, you cannot exist on earth. But she says, remember to remind yourself before you go to sleep that you are not the body, that you are not your astral body, you're not your passions and desires, and definitely not that lower personality that is totally involved in the lower aspect of life, which is the human desires and passions, and it's linked. It is Buddhi-Manas at this stage because we have developed it to perfection. But what she tells us is that we have become immersed in it. We're supposed to go through it. It's a necessary process, but she says now we have to use self-induced, self-devised effort in order to uplift ourselves out of that condition.
Out of the condition, yeah.
That's not an easy thing.
No, yes, it's a major task.
So I've read some things that say that you can actually have some impact with your conscious mind about what happens when you're dreaming or at some point during the night when you're sleeping. About, like, you could pick if you wanted to go to the Akashic records or like other places. Does HPV say anything about that?
Yes, I'm not sure that she used those exact words, but yes, we have access through this process to everything, to perfect understanding, and I think that's what you're describing.
I would like to add something, if I may. The Akashic records are the primordial aspect of life, which is the highest.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one who used to reach those records. We went and visited his temple, or in
The guy in
is it
Virginia
North
Beach?
Carolina or Beach? Virginia
Yeah,
Beach.
yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember his name.
I'll tell you in
But-
a while.
But that is not available to every human soul. It depends on what you're going to do with it when you're there. That individual used to use it to assist people in reaching health. In other words, he did not obtain the information for himself, but to help someone else. And that's the key that we need to remember. Those higher planes are universal. They're not applicable to the personality, but to the individuality. And first, you have to be extremely pure. Second, you have to be totally altruistic in your endeavor. It is not for personal use, because she tells us that that's a spiritual plane, but as soon as you make it personal, it becomes psychic and it falls down. So those are the conditions you have to have to be able to access it.
Yeah. Well, the personality is associated with selfishness, etc. And we have some misconceptions about the personality. Some of us are in love with them, with our personality, and we're going to lose it if we, go along with this philosophy. But our individuality is what we need to be focusing on.
You cannot lose
And
your
you
personality
can't
either.
lose it.
You
That's what I'm
need it.
trying to say.
Without the intellectual mind, you can't work on this plane.
No, I mean, on this plane, we need to have our personality.
But you
yeah.
need to be able to transcend it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm just totally blank as to that guy's name. That's the first book I had read.
Yeah, we went to
his place
to his place and had a lecture there.
Yeah, it's
Very,
old.
very
It's a
impressive.
very old thing. But
Yeah,
yeah,
he
he
was
used
with
to
us
be
in the
able
early
to.
1900s, 1930, that time
He
frame.
used to be able to access it.
Edgar Casey.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So you either bring the gift with you, or you develop it in this life through effort. But it's a gift because what you're doing is helping others. You're not using it for yourself. And plus, he never charged anybody any money because you can't sell it. In other words, the gift is given to you as a result of your work. But as soon as you make it a profitable endeavor, it is not spiritual anymore because she says you cannot sell it. And that's why perhaps Theosophical organizations are not very popular, because money cannot be charged, it's free. Otherwise, it is not Theosophy. And in this day and age, people wonder why it should be that way, for instance.
Yeah. And that is a sticky wicket too, because we've got to have money to operate
Yeah,
in
but
this
it's
material
just
world.
But it's
So
voluntary.
if we are doing it for the money, then that's a real problem.
No, we're not
It
talking
doesn't
about
work.
running the lodge. That is
Yeah.
just voluntary. Whoever wants to contribute does. But we're
Voluntary
talking about your
contributions, yeah.
gift. You can't sell it.
No, exactly.
To make a further comment on Akashic records, there's an article that I'd like to share with you that says Theosophy does talk about Akasha and Akashic, but never mentions anything about Akashic records. Akashic records are apparently a term adopted by the new people in the New Age movement, and in Theosophy there's a distinction between astral light and Akasha, which the student's understanding is what you refer to as is the astral light, not Akasha. Astral light is the lowest plane of Akasha. This article goes into detail of that, and I'll share it with you so that you can read more.
Yeah.
And do you have anything else to add about that?
Astral light is not the same as astral.
Akasha and astral.
Akasha,
No,
they're not the
astral,
same thing. No.
meaning ether is the lowest of it.
Okay.
But astral also has 7 different levels to it. Please
Okay.
remember that. So as you go higher and higher, you can put the synthesis together. And that is what Casey did. He reached the higher levels of that consciousness, not the lowest. Lowest is ether, which is the next level close to the earth. Thank you for your explanation. But remember, astral light has differentiations of 7 levels in
Right, that's
itself
right.
also.
Yes.
And the higher levels is what we are talking about when we refer to the records being preserved,
The higher levels.
not the lowest.
Right.
So what's
highest.
the connection between Akasha and astral light? Is there one, or
Yeah, well, it's in the secret doctrine and it's a talk on its own.
okay, we can
Yes,
discuss
it is.
afterwards.
Primordial is where you need to go for that. Primordial substance.
But that
Because she calls
Akashic
it
light
divine akasha, it's
Yeah.
primordial. Primordial is prior to differentiation. Astral light is afterwards. It reflects logoic light. But remember, it has 7 levels. So we're not talking about ether, we're talking about the astral light on the higher level, where the records are.
So, right, so the records meaning everything that has been in the past,
Akashic
present,
light.
and future. It's retained
The
there.
lowest is the reflection of what we put in it. That's not the same thing.
Okay.
What we put in it reflects back on us. And she says that's why people do murdering, really ugly, wicked things, because they're attuned to that which is in the astral light, which is the lowest part of it, and it influences us during sleep. So we must not think that what this recommendation is valueless, because it really is to clean the mind, to put positive input into our mind and imagination, in the Buddhist countries, people look at Buddha's little
Image.
statue
Mhm.
before they go to sleep, or Kuan Yin. You have to, choose what you
Reminders,
want to
yeah.
concentrate on, and really concentrate your mind on it. It is really important.
I think what Jessica's referring to is that record of every thought and every deed and all there is.
That's
And
the lowest
that's
aspect, and it
the
reflects
lower
it back
aspect.
on us.
Right.
HPV says that we have found it clear, but we have polluted it tremendously, and the pollution reflects back on us.
The
Everything
pollution
that
does,
we
but
do.
the record itself is
Well, the
there.
record is polluted.
That's Akashic though, right?
No, astral. Akashic is the primordial aspect of it.
I understand that. Okay.
Yeah, let's talk about it after.
Okay, we can explore that later, maybe have a talk on that later. Thank you very much for joining us, and next week's talk is on
The real Christmas.
the real Christmas. Wow, time is flying. Thank you.